voice can break the dark. A single spark ignites the heart. But if we turn when justice calls, the chains we forge will bind us all. When truth is silenced, when lies take hold, the cost is freedom, the soul grows cold. No one stands tall while another must fall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, defending every voice, defending every right. For the moment we falter, the moment we stall, we lose our own freedom when we let others fall. You can't stand free while others kneel. When justice fades, it's freedom they steal. An innocent condemned, a crime unspoken, and with it the bond of liberty is broken. No tyrant rules without our consent. Oppression thrives where silence is spent. Stand for the weak, the silence is small, or freedom will crumble for us all. We're mavericks of freedom, guardians of the light, fighting for the truth, for what is just and right. For the rights of one are the rights of all. We rise or we fall by answering the call. Even those we may oppose deserve the rights we all uphold. For if we deny them what is fair, we build our own prison in despair. The fight's not easy, it never will be, but justice for one is the key to be free. We stand as mavericks, together we strive, defending the rights that keep freedom alive. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, upholding every truth, protecting every right. When one is oppressed, we're all in the thrall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. So take a stand, let your courage rise. Defend the truth, don't compromise. For the soul of the world, the writing's on the wall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all.
Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Maverick News Channel. Hello, Mavericks and new viewers. Let me check my audio. I got to make sure the audio is no. The audio issue rears its ugly head again. How about this? Is that better? I think this is better. Yes, I believe it is. Okay, so we have our audio issue fixed, I think. We were on the wrong microphone as we went through a reboot here just before airtime again with some internet issues. But we're live and on the air and about to show you video of the ice storm that has swept through some parts of Ontario. Some pretty serious damage out there tonight, so keep your heads low. Down where I'm at, it's still very warm, but severe thunderstorm warnings even in this neck of the woods in southern Ontario, just on the doorstep of the US of A, where politics continues to run thick tonight. and followed from the Signalgate scandal continues. Mike Pekarek will join us tonight to share some insight into the some further analysis of the what may well be the most serious, or at least the most serious publicly disclosed or revealed security breach in American history. What impact will that have on the Trump administration? Not exactly sure, but we're going to also show you some of the hypocrisy that is on display, if you choose to see it, within that team that was on that Signal chat. So there's all that, and all this while Trump tells NBC News he's very angry and, quote, pissed off with Putin. What does that all mean? Is it genuine or more political theater? Well, we have all that and a whole lot more coming up on the other side of this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Yes, pretty severe ice storm in some parts of Ontario over the past 24 hours. We knew it was coming, and it has hit. This is what things look like up in the Barrie area tonight.
What?
Yeah, trees down almost everywhere.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14,
Yeah, holy smokes is right.
Yeah. Down on cars.
What the fuck are you doing? What?
I don't know. It's not looking good, though. Welcome to Ontario at the end of March.
What?
It's always unpredictable, unstable. Yeah, and it's a good way to learn how to count. All the trees down. Here's some more footage. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And a lot of people without power still in some parts of the province tonight. Got a little more photos. I always have mixed feelings about these ice storms when they hit this time of year, because on the one hand, they do sometimes result in some pretty serious damage, but on the other hand, at certain times of the day, especially early in the morning and at sunset, when the sun comes through, the ice covering the tree branches and the icicles that just hang, it's beautiful. Deadly and yet so beautiful. Jagmeet Singh out in British Columbia, leader of the NDP tonight. We're going to get into this other news too. Don't worry. We're going to get into that stuff. But this is happening tonight. Jagmeet Singh, and we try to bring you all of the political parties and all the leaders and provide some balance here. Here he is out in Burnaby, BC.
This is amazing. First, let's give it up for the incredible Mark Hancock
Campaigning federal
and
election
Suzanne
on.
Skidmore. And for all of you that are here today, make some noise for yourself. Wow. Okay, this is an awesome way to kick off our regional office. It's amazing to see so many amazing faces here. First and foremost, I just want you to know what sets us apart from the other parties, what makes us who we are as New Democrats, is that we believe fundamentally that we are all better off when we take care of each other, when we look out for one another, when we lift each other up, we all rise together. And that's what this election's about. It's about who's in it for you. This is a very important election. And when we're up against a storm, because the threat of Donald Trump, the threat of tariffs and a trade war, it is a storm. And when that storm hits, we do not have to choose between a leaky roof or a cracked foundation. We don't have to choose the liberals who have made it clear under Mark Carney that they're more interested in tax cuts for the millionaires than helping out working people. We don't have to choose Pierre Poilievre, who only believes that cuts to health care, cuts to dental care, cuts to pensions, to give more to the billionaires is the way forward. We don't have to choose that. We can choose New Democrats who believe in putting people first. NDP, 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 NDP. Woo! So, in this election, that choice, who's going to be fighting for you, who's going to be in it for you. We know that a lot of us have seen an incredible resilience of Canadians in the face of threats of Donald Trump saying, you know what, our elbows are up, we're fighting back, we will never be the 51st state. We are proud of our country, strong and free. But what are we wrapping ourselves in when we wrap ourselves in the Canadian flag? What are the values we're wrapping ourselves in? Well, we said that we believe in taking care of each other. That's a Canadian value as well, looking out for your neighbor. And what represents that more than a universal public health care that's there for you when you need it? The way to fight back against Donald Trump is not by making our Canadian healthcare system more like the U.S., it's by doubling down on what makes us Canadian, a free and universal public healthcare that's there for everyone when they need it. So if you believe that a person working one job should be able to put food on the table, vote NDP.
Okay, so we're going to pull out there. Now, Jagmeet Singh also has a big rally tonight in Vancouver proper. And I don't know that we'll be able to bring that to you, but I wanted to at least share that clip from him to, again, make sure that we provide balance and give you some coverage of all the different leaders. And before we get to Mike and some further analysis on this Signalgate scandal out of the U.S., I wanted to share this with you as well, because there's so much spin happening, and I'm being charitable when I use the word spin. Maybe propaganda, maybe outright lies would be more appropriate, but there is a lot of political spin going on, and we're all being bombarded from all sides with this kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, the anti-Carney stuff, you take it for any way you want, but I'm just going to give you an example tonight of where this stuff is just going a little bit off the rails. Let me just show you this one. This guy here, I don't know him. He's just getting a lot of traction on Twitter. I'm not trying to pick a Twitter fight tonight, but I can't help it. I can't help it with this one. I'll play this, and then I'm going to show you what the issue is.
This is insane. I just found out why Mark Carney was endorsed by Donald Trump. Watch this. This is in French. It just came out today, and this is using the Google Translate. Mark Carney has several cards up his sleeve to face Donald Trump due to his past role in Brookfield, which has helped the Americans' president's clan. The firm, when it was chaired by Mark Carney, paid back Donald Trump's son-in-law by saving his company from serious financial difficulties. The deal dates back to 2018 when Brookfield signed a 99-year lease to rent the entirety of a 41-story building owned by the Kushner family in the heart of Manhattan. The total cost $1.1 billion. The Canadian company paid the 99 years of rent all at once instead of paying it annually. This highly unusual move ensured a massive and rapid cash flow inflow for the Kushner company, which was due to repay $1.2 billion in a mortgage repayment in payments in just a few months later. In February 2019, Brookfield is a sprawling Canadian investment firm. Mark Carney chaired the board of directors until January 15 and still holds significant financial interest in the company. And sorry, I want to correct myself. Mark Carney was the chairman when the Senate Finance Committee began the investigation of the infamous $1.1 billion check. During his tenure at Brookfield, he twice refused to provide the information requested by senators. This was said by Senator Ron Wyden, the committee chairman, in a 2022 letter to the firm reviewed by our Office of Investigation. Unbelievable. The Senate Finance Committee was trying to understand the links between Brookfield and Qatar since the transaction was made by Brookfield Property Partners, BPY, a branch of the firm whose largest investors are the sovereign wealth fund of this Gulf monarchy. Although, according to Reuters, the Qataris have never exercised this right, suspicions of conflicts of interest and interference are strong, as Jared Kushner was President Trump's Middle East advisor between 2018 and 2021. In an attempt to clarify the situation, Senator Wyden first sent a letter requesting the information from Brookfield in December 2020. 2 years later, in October 2022, having received no satisfactory response, he again called the company to cooperate. This is why Donald Trump endorsed him. This is why he would prefer the Liberals to be in power. Mark Carney scratched his son-in-law's back to the tune of $1.1 billion. Mark Carney did not disclose any of this. Mark Carney has significant financial interest in Brookfield today. Millions and millions of dollars in stock options, and he refuses to tell us what conflicts of interest he has. It makes complete sense now why Donald Trump referred to him as Prime Minister Mark Carney when he tweeted out that he spoke with him and that he would speak to him after the election. Do you not see this? This is insane. And here's the craziest part. If the roles were reversed and Pierre Poilievre had this sort of relationship where he authorized over $1 billion to Trump's, basically his family and his son-in-law, you don't think the main news outlets, our Main Street media in Canada, would not be all over this? This is absolutely massive news. Carney is in bed with Donald Trump.
Except there's a little problem. The transaction, the $1.1 billion lease deal, it's 666 Fifth, I think it's Fifth Ave, Fifth property. It's in Manhattan. 666 Fifth Avenue, maybe it might be what it is. The $1.1 billion deal basically transacted in 2018, might have closed in 2019, maybe. See, Mark Carney was still the governor of the Bank of England at that time. Didn't join Brookfield until August of 2020. And he wasn't involved in the negotiation or the closure of the deal. And so it sort of starts to fall apart there. You can make of it what you will. There's an election on, folks. It's spin. And I'm being charitable. I can talk more about it another night, but we have to get to Mike because we have other news, real news to cover. And I'll be right back after this.
Maverick News. fighting for freedom.
Okay, let's bring Mike in. Hello, sir.
geez,
Welcome
I'm
back.
really close there. Yeah. How are you tonight, Rick?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm all right. I was listening to that guy about the Mark Carney. I'm like, wait, what? So I was Googling it, and then you explained what I had just found on Google. So it was like a 2-minute Google.
Yeah.
And I might have clicked through three links, and then I'm like, this is not right.
Yeah, I was like, I saw that, and someone sent it to me, and they're asking me, "Is this real, Rick?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, like 2018, it doesn't jive." So this is what's going on out there, and it's being laid on thick on a lot of
Oh, I'm
different
sure.
fronts.
Yeah, that's the way it is here too.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but we shall move on now and get to what I hope is something a little more valuable to our viewers tonight, because although I don't know, this Signalgate thing continues to take off in different directions. It's evolving. It isn't going away.
No, I think it has real traction because I don't know if you got that email that I sent after I sent you the presentation, but a thing popped up in my news feed about the recent polling that even 60% of Republican voters, did I say 60? 60% of Republican voters think that this is a big deal. So a majority and a big one, so 60-40 of Republican voters are like, yeah, this needs to be questioned further, and somebody needs to be hung out to dry on this one.
Yes, I'm also seeing now reports from Politico. I don't know if that's the original source for the story, but indicating that J.D. Vance and some others in that group had asked Trump to fire Waltz as a result of this.
That's been bubbling for a few days. We can get to why he's by no means the only one that needs to get the axe, but when I was here last week, I did mention that if there's anyone that absolutely has to go, it's Waltz, and we'll see if that actually happens. It's been brewing a little bit because one thing that Trump does not like is being stabbed in the back. And this is one of those underreported things on the Signal chat that J.D. Vance was questioning Trump's decisions that had already been made. And Trump's deputy chief of staff had to step in and say, no, this is greenlit. That was Stephen Miller. So that is evidently not playing well in Trump land because of his own vice president. Well, we saw how he treated his former vice president when there was a gallows erected in front of the Capitol and all of his MAGA supporters were saying, hang Mike Pence. So Trump's vice presidents don't tend to be treated well.
And then we're seeing Trump, or reports from NBC that he was engaged in this phone interview with an NBC personality. And in the interview, he's saying that he doesn't fire people on his team over fake news reports. I'm like, fake news?
So one of the problems with this, and one of the reasons why I'm wondering if anyone is going to get spanked at all, is sorry, a little bit of my sergeant comes back there because I'm back in a little bit of military land. But Trump in his first term, as much as I disliked what happened in his first term, he did actually hire at least a decent number of good people. So like Jim Mattis as the Secretary of Defense for the first couple of years was an amazing person, a great Secretary of Defense. Some of the people that I like a little bit less, but had honor, and they had the moral character to stand up to Trump and say, look, you're wrong, Mr. President. This is not right. And so there were people like McMaster, John Kelly, one of his chiefs of staff, to a lesser extent, Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence, but there were a few other people like that. This time he hired yes man and sycophants. He didn't hire anybody that has the courage to go up and say, look, Mr. President, you were dead wrong. And that's terrible leadership. I can tell you that. We can go down into a leadership rabbit hole on how to choose your people, how to delegate, and all that kind of stuff. But that's not really why we're here tonight.
Right. So you've put together really a whole presentation for us this evening.
Yeah, I did a little digging. So I sent you, I don't even remember when, but I basically sent you this stream of consciousness sometime last week. And I'm like, yeah, how about if I put that together? So the thing is that as at least some of your listeners and watchers know, I'm 22 years military. I was 22 years in the U.S. Air Force. I did. And look, I put that together so quickly. That's not centered. So sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
The job that I did required me to have a security clearance. Mine was a mid-level secret. Was my security clearance with, and the way this works is that if you need to know more than your security clearance, it's called a need to know. And so the person that is in charge of whatever information that's above your clearance, but you need to know it, can, sometimes they call it reading you in. That's kind of a Hollywood thing, but that would be maybe something that the watchers, civilians, would understand. So I was always cleared to be in support of the president and other foreign heads of state. I was cleared to see various SCIFs and secure data channels. One of the pictures that I'm going to show you is what we call a KOC. That's a Combined Air Operations Center. It's a very secure facility. I've seen several of them. The one in Qatar, I visited more than once, and I'll talk about that when we get to the picture. But that's kind of my background. While I did one thing as my primary job, anybody that served in the U.S. military and probably the Canadian military knows what I'm about to say. I had my primary job, but then I had all the other things that the military asked me to do. So while I was hired to be a professional musician, that's what I was trained for. The Air Force never trained me on my primary duty. I was a operations person where I dealt with logistics and planning. I was a team leader of teams anywhere from just 2 people all the way up to more than 100 people, where I was the lead. There was strategic planning. I was a member of just 3 of us for our unit that we dealt with European Command, the U.S. State Department, and then the embassies. There was a time where I knew every single foreign attaché at every embassy in Europe by their first name, because I just dealt with them that much. So I had other jobs. One of my jobs was actually security manager. And I had that twice at different points in my career. One where I was just a security manager as kind of a low-level sergeant. And then I was the section chief of the readiness section, that one of the things was security management, where I dealt with security clearances and people that were stupid and did bad things with secure information. And I had to, as you know, spank them because it was relatively minor what I had to deal with, but it gets major real fast. So just so people know where this is coming from, I've dealt with this a lot. Everything, like if I'm cleared to be with POTUS, when we talk about operational security, where I go is not necessarily classified, but in terms of an operational security environment, where I go will, if somebody can grab where I am from just something that somebody carelessly said and then put it together with something else, they can start say, well, the president's going to be here at this time, right? So you can grab little bits of information that are not inherently classified, and certainly a week from now probably will not be at all. But right now it could be a real problem. So that was a lot of my career when I was performing for the heads of state of France or the UK or Ukraine or any of the Baltic countries. Just everywhere I went, there was operational security, and it was a big deal. It was an almost daily thing for me to consider for 22 years of my life. So that's where I'm coming from. So we're going to be dealing primarily with my expertise, which is coming from the U.S. military. There is, when I first joined, the U.S. military dealt with classification a little bit different than the rest of the government. Starting under President Obama, that changed. So all of the government worked under the same overarching set of rules. And so that was roughly 15 years ago that changed. And then a little bit more recently, 6-7 years ago, they changed the non-classification, the non-classified designation that used to be in the Air Force. We used to call that FOUO, which is for official use only. That's not cleared for the public dissemination. When Senator Mark Kelly brought up CUI, controlled unclassified information, that replaced FOUO in the Air Force, and it replaced all the other things like the State Department had their designation and all that kind of stuff. So the entire U.S. government works under CUI now. It's the same thing. They just changed the acronym.
Okay. So shall we move ahead here in a slide?
Sure.
Oh,
so you know the level of what we're talking about, whether it was classified or not. And if you let a small detail leak, the major ramifications that it can have. I don't know how many people know their history, but the United States played a big operational security information war against the Germans prior to the D-Day invasions in 1944. We had the Germans, and especially Hitler, convinced that we were going to land at Calais. That's the closest physical part of France to the United Kingdom. You can see, like from the Calais side, you can see the White Cliffs of Dover from Calais. So literally you can see across the English Channel, and we had them convinced. There's a couple of things. There's a big port there. Calais is kind of a peninsula, so if you land it, you can cut off and you can set up a beachhead. It's a very logical place for the Allies to have landed in 1944 to try and liberate France. We had them convinced. Even on D-Day, we had bombers going over, like dropping chaff, like pretending there's just this huge air force that's about to go attack. So yeah, that's what we're talking about, where the wrong word at the wrong time can make all of the difference in the world. And one of the reasons why the Normandy invasion succeeded is that the Germans had several divisions of troops held in reserve to repel any potential Allied invasion. And for at least 24 hours, the Germans were convinced that Normandy was a fake and that we were really going to land at Calais. It was going to happen. And so the Germans never sent their reserve troops in to repel the Normandy invasions. That's one of the main reasons. So operational security was key in one of the outstanding battles in military history. And anyway, the next one. So operational security, I don't necessarily want to read this. It covers a whole bunch of things. I've touched on it a little bit, where you can take little bits of information and any one bit might not be that big of a deal. Sometimes one bit can be a huge deal, and we'll go into what Hegseth said and show how big of a deal that was. But sometimes it can be a little thing, like this unit that nobody cares about, their bus leaves at 10 o'clock, you know, or these people are staying at this hotel, or this train leaves at this time. You know, you get the rail. That was actually one of the reasons why we knew the Russians were actually going to invade Ukraine in 2022, is somebody did a deep dive on their rail schedule. And it was obvious that it was an invasion. It wasn't just an exercise. So this can, we'll get into, you can see the link. Everything that I say is going to be backed up by a link. Anybody, if they wanted a screenshot, or if this is on YouTube forever or whatever, they can go to these links, they can look it up, they can check me. Anything that jeopardizes people, gear, or operational success is a big deal. And I'm underselling that, if anything. I'm avoiding curse words. I'm avoiding the knife hand. I'm avoiding any sort of sergeant voice.
Okay. And the reason you're highlighting all this tonight is because it doesn't get more serious than this.
No, it does not. People's lives are on the line. And when you're talking about military action against, in this case, the Houthi terrorists, that you had American pilots, their ships, the various equipment, because every F-18, once you load an F-18 up with ordnance and targeting pods and sensor pods and electronic warfare gear, you're talking $100 million just for the jet, one jet. And I'm sure these strike packages were several jets each. So you get to several $1 billion of gear, just gear, very quickly. Because that's just, military gear is expensive. If you want it to work, you got to pay for it. So when you're talking about all of this, some of the bits of OPSEC before anything happens, you should assume have a classification level, whether they have been officially designated or not. And we'll get into what the different classification levels are, I think, on the next slide, but maybe not. You should assume, depending, okay, so here you are. You can read these. Top secret is exceptionally grave damage to national security. So you're talking about a mission failure, especially if it's a public mission failure. And if you have a public mission failure combined with American losses, like if the Houthis had shot down a jet and captured a pilot, that would have been huge. American technology is just worthless against, terrorists that don't have even a government, much less a budget. So secret is serious damage to the national security. And then confidential is just damage. So that's why I'm saying that certain things, even just little bits of information, what Pete Hegseth shared on the Signal chat, some of it raised all the way up to top secret. And it was top secret, need to know only. There's a couple of things I didn't necessarily include in this, where there's top secret SCI, which is special compartmented information, which is even higher than top secret, although it doesn't necessarily make it on here. But because they wanted to simplify it so, the average 18-year-old idiot draftee can understand, right?
And just to clarify, Hegseth must know this. He has to know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
for several reasons, he has to know. For one thing, he at one point had risen to the rank. It's not a high rank, but it's also not a baby rank of major in the, I believe, the U.S. Army. He was an officer. I don't know any of you have ever watched Band of Brothers, where a medic chews out. I think at the time it was Captain Winters. It's like, you're an officer, you're in charge, you should know better. There is more expected of officers. And if he was just a little middling, but now he's in charge. So the guy at the top should know better. And if he doesn't, that's a big problem for any number of reasons. But like I said, that what he shared, if I was reading it, I would presume that it not only reached top secret, but since it was applied to a specific operation, it was top secret SCI on that specific military operation. I knife-handed you a little bit. So yeah, now some of the stuff that I saw, I would have immediately assumed was top secret if I was in uniform.
Yeah. And I'm just a civilian, and I realized that immediately, but hey.
So this is the relevant quote from Hegseth on the chat. I pasted it in here. It is mildly shortened. I cut out a couple of words. You can compare it to the screenshots in the Atlantic if you want. What I did is I made larger and in bold anything that if I was reading this in uniform, would assume not only violates OPSEC, but is classified at various levels. So for instance, the confirmed with CENTCOM, you're already talking about, people probably don't know, the American military has what we call combatant commands, where Northern Command would actually deal with Canada. That's North American Air Defense, mainly air defense, but it's defense of North America. It's Northern Command is centered, I believe, out of Colorado, if it still is, and it includes joint operations with the Canadian military. European Command is obvious. Africa Command is obvious. Pacific Command is obvious. Central Command is Southwest Asia, and that you're automatically dealing with Saudi Arabia, Israel, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq. You know the area, so you're already talking about, you've already zeroed it in. So I would assume that even if you're just saying I confirmed with CENTCOM, that's already at least confidential. F-18's launching, you're giving an exact launch time, that's top secret right there. Trigger based, he's naming a unit. First strike window starts, and then he's like, terrorist is known at his location right now. That's SCI. That's top secret SCI. There's probably only a handful of people in the military, maybe 12 total, maybe 6 in the United States military that knew what the target was and why the timing was there. The pilots probably didn't know. So, and they were the ones that are dropping the bomb. They're just ordered to give the target and drop the target. So that's huge. The strike drones launch, that's also giving you what I was saying about the OPSEC, where you've got one little piece of information here. You've got strike drones, but those are also ISR assets. That's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. They're going to have cameras that report on secure military comms back to Central Command. They're going to be what later in the text that I did not include when they're talking about battle damage assessment, there were still drones watching. So that's another thing that'll like, okay, when the drones arrive on station, that's when the bombs are going to hit. So you're giving the defensive side everything here. Strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop. Are you kidding me? That's top secret, special compartmented. That's a couple of people at the White House, a couple of people at Central Command. You're talking 4 stars on the shoulders, a couple of cabinet secretaries and the president. That's everybody that would know that kind of information. And then he talks about a second strike and Tomahawk launches. So now you're dealing with at least one drone base, at least one aircraft carrier, 2 different F-18 units on at least one carrier. And then those Tomahawks are probably submarine launched, and that probably you're talking about a converted Ohio class missile submarine right there. So you good Lord, you just outlined. Oh my God. I don't even know where to begin with how bad this actually is. And it's on Signal. It's on a commercial thing that you can take from the Apple store if you're on an iPhone. It's going to be touching all sorts of civilian networks. The Atlantic guy was sitting in a parking lot of a grocery store. One of these guys was in Moscow. So when you're talking about operational security, one of the times when I was leading a team of 6, I was in Serbia, and our normal hotel that was owned by pro-Western Serbian businessmen was closed for repairs. The only other hotel that we could stay at was owned by a Russian oligarch. And we were like, look, don't turn on your phone. If you're going to use a tablet, keep it on airplane mode. Don't touch the Wi-Fi. Just don't even touch the Wi-Fi, or you're going to get spyware on your machine that you're going to bring back home. If you absolutely positively need to use any sort of internet, find a coffee shop nearby. So coffee shop internet was more trustworthy than the Russian provided Wi-Fi at the hotel. You got a guy in Moscow that's involved with this signal chat. So it's just the levels of insanity and carelessness and just sheer stupidity. That is what Hegseth said. I don't even know why he still has a job. Like, if it was any other president, this guy would be gone and probably locked up, because this is bad. If this was a staff that's under my control, he would be in front of the commander. He would have had a security clearance ripped apart. He would have gone into mandatory 6 months at least of retraining, and that's if he didn't actually get court-martialed. So that would be just for being an idiot. You know, he would have been in deep trouble for about 6 months. But when you're talking about something like this, when you're talking about launch times and all that kind of stuff, you would have been court-martialed.
Yeah, there's no way this is secure. Even as a journalist, I deal with sources And often I won't engage in some levels of discussion over Signal, even when people think it's secure. It isn't, because it's bouncing off cell phone towers.
Yep.
In this case, it's being shared internationally
Mhm.
over to Russia through cell phone systems there, which can be intercepted. And the real vulnerability is on the cell phone side itself. If they can get into the phone, they're seeing the information after it has been decoded on the
Yes.
phone, so they can see
So
everything.
the thing about once you unlock your phone in a very hostile cyber environment, so for instance, the guy in Moscow, Witkoff, if I'm remembering the name correctly, once he unlocked his phone, any Russian electronic warfare team in the neighborhood, and I guarantee you that they had their eyes on him the entire time. So if he unlocked his phone, they're like, great, let's get into his phone. They would have been in there, and all of the end-to-end encryption in the world on Signal will not matter because they were in his phone. They can open the app remotely. So they can just open this and read it. The end-to-end encryption means exactly nothing.
And this stuff is all out in the public. So when Trump is sitting there again this weekend using, this witch hunt / fake news excuse again, for me, it has just lost its credibility. Not that it really should have ever had credibility, but he's sitting there saying, "Oh, it's all fake news. This is just a witch hunt. It's a hoax." Here we go again. We've seen others. I think Hegseth himself said this was
Yep.
a hoax. This is not a hoax. It's right there in black and white. It's been published. It's confirmed that this is real information. It's a witch hunt. It's a hoax. It's fake news. No, that what they're engaging in is some level of a strange psychological trick. It's like it's a psyop. Nothing to see here, folks.
Or they're
It's
just
not even
trying to
real.
bullshit you. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the battle.
Yeah.
That's it.
What they're trying to do is Trump has a standard thing of deflect and delay.
Yeah.
So what he wants to do is create, it's kind of like what we were talking about with the FUD thing on disinformation ops, the fear, uncertainty, doubt, and despair.
Yeah.
Trump actually operates a little bit on this because he wants to push back. It's funny because every time he accuses somebody else of something, it's really a confession of what he does. But I thought that was an interesting observation recently. But
unbelievable.
He's trying to cause uncertainty in his listeners so that they doubt their lying eyes. They can read this text, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's trying to do all of this uncertainty stuff. He's trying to create delay in the idea that if he does this in his legal cases all the time, the appeals and the motions and all that kind of crap. He's just trying to create delay so that at some point the other side gets tired and they stop pushing back. So that's what he's trying to do here. Is he's trying to make the rest of us just get tired. But this is, I'm sorry, their pilots' lives on the line. And if an F-18 had gotten shot down and the crew captured, and then, the terrorists were parading them in front of a camera or like chopping their heads off like the ISIS terrorists would do, that's a big deal. And you can't sweep this under the rug. Hegseth needs to be punished for this. Yeah.
And, the fake news, witch hunt, Russia, excuses. It worked for a while, but at this point,
this has nothing to do with that. This is
right,
what he actually did.
Yeah. This is just, it has worn thin, and now you're seeing right through it, all of the BS.
So this is a little bit out of order, but if it doesn't actually reach classification levels, it's still not for public dissemination. It's still controlled information. You can see CUI is controlled unclassified information. I already mentioned it replaced FOUO in the military. You can see some of the specific categories, and if you go to that link, there's hundreds of categories. But you can see protected critical infrastructure information. So like the stuff that controls the electricity grid. or operational security or physical security. Like, what do the checkpoints on a military base look like? What procedures do we follow? It's not necessarily classified, but it's not public. It's not for the public to read. Physical security, personnel records. You don't need to know my military personnel records. You just don't. You don't need to know what the military doctors said about whatever injury I got 20 years ago. It's just not for you. It's protected information. Or that last one, CUI, SRI, nuclear security related information. So when somebody brings up CUI, it's not necessarily classified. This is not small stuff that we're talking about here. So personnel records of military people are private. They're protected. Nuclear security related information. I mean, so CUI, when they bring up CUI, this is another thing that they're trying to dodge and weave around. Well, it wasn't technically classified. Even if it wasn't, it's a big problem. Anyway.
And they continue to play word games saying there were no war plans shared, but that I think is them kind of hiding behind a very strict definition of
They're
what
hiding
a war
behind
plan
semantics.
is, right? Yes, semantics.
Because a war plan would be
like a detailed step-by-step strategy to invade a country.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out how to translate it because some of the stuff that I've seen, I probably can't. It's probably not necessarily classified, but it probably is CUI, where there are actual orders that are cut when you're actually going to do something. There are actual official orders that go out. And those kinds of things would add up to a war, an actual,
war plan, like to execute a whole war,
like an official detailed war plan. But I'm sorry, if you're in the moment and a target of opportunity presents itself, it might just be something small like that over secure channels. But what they were talking about on the Signal chat, if you were talking about that over secure military communication systems, it might not be any more official than that, because it's something like, we found a target and we have to act and we have to do it in the next 2 hours. And so there's not going to be a time.
That's an attack, and that information is top secret, but they're hiding behind the Atlantic using the word or the phrase war plans.
But what I'm saying is that if you had a target of opportunity like that, there would not be time to drop the war plans. You might at some point get an after the fact official order for it, just so, because you have to satisfy the paperwork, and then it's not just the paperwork for the sake of paperwork. Some of this is for historical documentation of what actually happened. And so they might have to draw up an official order after the fact to cover what they did. But yeah. This is a little bit of the restrictions on access. I did a little bit of more bolding here. The link, like I said, is right there. I left section 4.1a in there just so people can zoom right to it. This has to do with not only are you on a Signal chat, but some idiot added a journalist that shouldn't have been there at all. And so there's a need to know. So aside from adding the Atlantic journalist, the fact that it's on Signal and Witkoff's in Russia and somebody else is in a grocery store parking lot, there's a whole lot of people that don't have a need to know that have access to this now. So every person, look at underneath, you've got A, and then you got 1, 2, 3, and then you got B. Every person who has met the standards for access to classified information shall receive contemporaneous training on safeguarding that information. Criminal, civil, and administrative sanctions will fall on anyone who fails to protect classified information from unauthorized disclosure. What that means, because I lived this for 22 years, is that every single person on that chat is guilty. Every single person on that chat violated at least 3 laws in terms of protecting classified information. This is completely aside from the Secretary of Defense moral obligation to protect the people under his command to the greatest extent possible. So aside from that, every single person on this chat. The next one, an official may not remove classified information. I left this because Donald Trump is guilty of that one. They may not direct information to be declassified just because they want to take it. That's right there in the law. So just the Mar-a-Lago, all those boxes of confidential and secret information and nuclear war plans and all that kind of stuff that were at Mar-a-Lago's bathroom. It's definitely illegal. It was not a witch hunt. Trump broke the law. Straight up. The next one, classified information may not be removed from official premises without proper authorization. Why did I?
Can I stop for a second? Why would he even want those documents at Mar-a-Lago? Why does any president take? Why does any president take documents like that anyway?
So there's a couple of things. There's some. So we could, when we get into the skiffs later, I was going to mention that Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, I don't think the Obamas did. Definitely President Trump. Probably, yes, President Bush had one at his ranch in Texas. They have in their actual homes, like their personal homes where they lived before they got elected. All of these people have secure skiffs, secure compartmented information facilities that were installed in their homes once they were elected, right? So a lot of them had secret information that was going through their personal homes, and some of it might have just not been picked up properly. For instance, I think the Biden thing was a genuine mistake. It was a mistake. It was a problem. It needed to be fixed, but I don't think it was intentional. I think it was an aspect of it ran through his house, and that's just the way it is. In Trump's, because we actually saw them loading these boxes from the White House onto a moving truck and driving it to Mar-a-Lago. We have video of that. That was definitely not this case. I could conjecture because every intelligence service in the world, whether they are friends like, Germans or Canadians or Israelis or the French or whatever, or our enemies like China and Russia, 100% have covert agents at Mar-a-Lago. I guarantee you. If they don't, they're idiots. So very few of these intelligence services for these countries that I just named are run by idiots. There are some countries that don't have great intel services, but not the ones that I named. So I guarantee you that Russia, China, probably Iran, the Saudis and the Pakistanis, which are kind of frenemies to the United States, everybody has agents at Mar-a-Lago. So he might have been looking to sell some of this, profit from it, because he has a whole lot of debt. It's about to come due as well. He might have just been looking for bragging rights because he's an egomaniac and a narcissist. So when this actually was documented where he had some guest, a journalist from Fox, I don't know if it was Sean Hannity or something, but he's like, look at what I've got. These are like nuclear attack for Iran from 2018,
Yeah.
And so I'm conjecturing a little bit on why he had it. I just know that it was definitely a conscious choice, that it wasn't just when you left office, we missed these. There was another one I'd like to say, and don't quote me on this. It was somebody from either the Bill Clinton presidency or the Barack Obama presidency that still had a security clearance and went in and then tried to take documents out stuffed in his socks. And I can't remember who that was. And it was pretty high-ranking dude. He wasn't in office anymore. But I'm like, he wanted to take them so that he could review them and write his memoirs. But it was still breaking the law. I'm sorry. So it was a big deal at the time. We'll get to other people that have been punished for doing things like this if you want. But what was you have to, so in E, you have to protect things no matter where they are, as if they were in a protected environment. Now, that last one I included because it incriminates DNI Tulsi Gabbard, consistent with law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The agency head, the director of national intelligence shall establish uniform procedures to ensure that automated information systems, including networks and telecom systems that collect, create, communicate, compute, disseminate, process, and store classified information. She must, this is central, and this is in the letter of the law, it's her job. She must prevent access by unauthorized persons. She must ensure the integrity of the information, and she must to the max. And then it went on and on and on. So when she's in front of the Senate committee being a complete blithering idiot, I'm sorry, she just completely failed at her job. So this is not Russia, Russia, Russia. This is people completely failing at their job.
Yeah, and then making excuses, and Trump
and trying to
down.
blame other people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Or,
It's
saying, why is somebody pointing out my blatant disregard for American national security in the letter of the law in plain English?
Yeah. And this coming from people who were so incredibly critical of those who came before. And now
we'll get into, if you want to, we can get into why Hillary's was both a big deal, but also far less than this. It was still a big deal, and she still needed to get smacked.
And here's your next slide: sensitive compartmented information facilities.
Yeah, so a SCIF. I have been in several SCIFs. Everything that was said on that chat should have been discussed in a SCIF. These are physical locations. Right in the middle, they've been RF shielded, optically shielded. They've got all sorts of multi-layer security on them. Just to be near one, you have to pass through multi-layers of security, and then you have to pass through a couple of different layers to get into the room, and then to access any information in that room is yet more steps. So without saying too much about that, which I probably can't, just know that it's nothing's going to be 100% protected, but a SCIF is very well protected in terms of information security. They, like at the top there, they exist securely to securely discuss and transmit sensitive information. This is exactly where you want to talk about what the launch times are and what the target is and when the target is going to be where you need that target to be to hit them. The need to know, multifaceted access. Again, all activity inside of a SCIF should be assumed to be sensitive and not shareable. So anything in that Signal chat, one, it should never have been on Signal because they broke the law taking it out of a SCIF. But you should just forget the classification question. If you're discussing it, assume that it's classified and you can't share it. That's just normal. That's anybody that's been in the military or in the national security business. They know this. This is basic stuff. This is like how to tie your shoes level of stuff.
Yeah.
Inside of a SCIF, you cannot take a phone, a camera, external drives, anything capable of recording. The exception is I have had a pencil and a pad of paper. But what I write down on there, I has to be cleared or I can't take it out. I have to shred it while I'm still inside the SCIF. So when there was a point in my career where I was inside of a SCIF at least once every 4 weeks because of certain reporting requirements for the job that I had, where the reporting that I had to do had to be in a secure environment. But I also would, when I was both a security manager and then also when I was the section chief of readiness for the unit, I had my people were deployed into a combat environment. And so I had to be there even more often dealing with stuff for my people. I had to take care of my people. This is kind of it's a real SCIF, but it's a little bit temporary. It's not quite a double wide, but I distorted it a little bit for the space. You can see that there's obviously computers right in the foreground, right in the middle. There's a screen on the back. You can see they're just sitting on fold them up chairs, and that one guy's sitting on a chest. So this is probably somewhere downrange. But those computers are not hooked up to the internet. They're hooked up to a secure military communication system called the SIPRNet, which is physically separated from the rest of the internet. It simply doesn't talk to. I could not email myself from one of those computers.
Right. Yeah.
This is inside of the White House. When you're talking about kinetic activities going after bombing terrorists, this is the famous picture from when we got Osama bin Laden. Going after the perpetrator of 9/11, it's a big deal. Kinetic activity, we had people in harm's way. If you look at, I have that helmet that I was wearing in Ukraine. It's got little rails where this is where you attach cameras and things like that, where they can report back. And I guarantee you that somebody's helmet camera was inside of the Situation Room, and the president, and the vice president, and secretary of state, and all those nice people in there. Bottom right is one of my favorite secretaries of defense. That's Robert Gates. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of people that would see somebody's helmet cam. And it never touched anything except for secure military channels. This is the official Situation Room in the White House. I believe they call it the JFK room, if I remember correctly. But you can see it's got screens behind. This is looking directly the presidential seals at the back. Directly behind the person that took this picture is a bigger screen where you can see what's going on. You can see in the pattern in the wood, there are things that pop up. It's a very secure room. This would be one place to have a discussion on bombing a valuable target in Yemen. This is Donald Trump in his first term, I believe. If I was reading the people around him, because he got Steve Bannon by that lamp. So I believe this is his first term. So yeah, he's used them. They know what's going on. KAOC is a combined air operations center. I've been in a couple of them. When you're talking about airstrikes, the KAOC is where it is. That's where you need to be. Central Command at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida has one of these. Central Command also has a very important one at LUD. Everything's organized from here. You can see all the cameras. You can talk to the pilots. Everything is organized from here. There is not necessarily, it's an air operations center that's near where I am, where Air Mobility Command and United States Transportation Command is about 20 minutes from where I'm sitting. They have an air operations center so that all of the cargo that the American military moves, somebody at the air operations center here near me is got eyes on that. So these are big deals. This is where you would be, not on signal. There's some G-Shock stuff going on this page. I don't necessarily need to.
Okay.
This is the one in, I believe, Langley, if I'm remembering correctly. This is either at Langley or at MacDill. I'm so sorry. I knew this about 3 hours ago, but you can see where you've got various workstations where people are deconflicting weapon systems. They're organizing different assets. They're talking to different people, making sure things go right. This is all on secure communications. One of my points on showing this and all the other skiffs and stuff like that is what in the cinnamon toast crunch are they doing talking about this crap on signal? Seriously, you've got this. They're everywhere. You've got mobile skiffs. You've got one picture that I didn't export is Barack Obama was at some Central American hotel, and they set up a temporary skiff in his hotel room. We do this for a living. There's people that know exactly how to do this. Why are they on Signal? It makes no sense. So the next slide is probably the one that I know a little better. Yeah, this is the Kayak at Al Udeid. And some of the screens are a little bit not quite engaged. They're doing this because most of the time those screens are showing very sensitive information, and this picture is in the public sphere. So, but you can see what that you've got the Gulf right there with the peninsula, Qatar sticking up, Iran on the northern side. All those little dots, those are ships that they're tracking. On the next one, you've got aircraft that are being tracked. But the reason I brought this up is that you would have screens back when I was deployed last time. When I was deployed, I was based out of Al Udeid, but I was deployed for several months, and I was at Al Udeid maybe 2 weeks because we would go back and then leave right away. And so I'd go to Al Udeid, drop my gear, go to Afghanistan, come back, drop my gear, go to Iraq, then go to Kyrgyzstan, just all the places that I went. While we were there, we were invited to the Kayak because there was something they used to call predator porn, which you could watch the live feed from all of the ISR or armed drones that we had over Iraq and Afghanistan. They were all on one of the screens here. People would make popcorn because there's really not a lot to do at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. And so showing up to the Kayak with popcorn was one of the things you did. So I spent several evenings at this Kayak.
I noticed the Canadian flags on the side.
Yep. This is a multinational thing. When I was there, Al Udeid had Brits, it had Aussies, it had Canadians. I'm trying to remember who else was there when I was there. It's a little bit conflicted, like the Romanians and some other people I met when I was in Iraq. Some other people I met when I was in Afghanistan, but I don't think they were at Al Udeid.
But when it comes to intelligence, what Donald Trump maybe doesn't, or maybe has forgotten, or maybe didn't realize, is that it all works better when you have allies and all that information, all those pieces of information coming in from all your allies, your friends from all over the world. It makes a bigger picture, right?
So it's probably been a while since I said this, that one of the things that has defined America over the past century or so, before Trump took office in January of this year, was that we didn't conquer people. When we went in and we had to go in hard, like we went into France and Germany and Japan, we gave them their country back and we helped them rebuild it.
Right.
And for nations like Japan and Germany that had some very serious war crimes, Japan with the rape of Nanking and various other things that they did, the mistreatment of prisoners, just all sorts of nasty things the Empire of Japan did in the name of their emperor. And then obviously the more heavily publicized things that the Germans did. But we rebuilt their country and we gave it back to them. We want to make friends because a friendly nation that we're on good terms with is so much more of a help than any other situation. So it's been a while since I've said that on your show, but I think it bared repeating.
Secure satellite comm.
Yeah. So why on earth are you on Signal? I mentioned SIPRNet. Their SIPRNet, one of the reasons it can be completely distinct from any other internet system, never goes through anybody's router. It does so from whatever base I'm at, it bounces off in a military satellite, and then it goes to the other military person that I'm talking to. It never touches anything else. So I gave some of the examples of the things that have been gone through time, Milstar, Wideband, Global Satcom, DSCS. there's an aw shucks thing where the internet that we're working on right here, which is internet protocol IP based, but it's IPv6 now. I don't know if they're going to go to V8 at any point, but the first one was a DARPA system that started in 1968. And we've been working on the satellite comm since April 1960 is when the very first one went into official. We need to start doing this. We didn't have a satellite for a few years, but that's when the program started. This is an example of an artist impression of two of the satellites. These are the more recent ones. They claim there's a difference between the two. You can see there's a couple of antenna differences. I'm not really a spacecraft junkie, so I couldn't necessarily tell you what all the differences are. I do know Canada is part of the system that these satellites are, though. Airborne Command Center. So one of the reasons I bring this up is that Witkoff in Russia, or if Hegseth was on the road because he's been traveling a bit, or if anybody else was on the road when these signal chats went down, of course, you've got Air Force One when the president's on it. It's a modified Boeing 747. It's got all of these. It's got SIPRNet. It's got the secure satellite comm. It's got everything on it. The VIP transports have the same thing. There's an airborne command post where you can literally run the United States military from an airborne modified Boeing 747. So there's no reason to use Signal. There really isn't. That's what I was pointing out here.
Yeah.
This is the airborne command post. This is the E4B. If anybody's really wants to look this up, you can see exactly how many antennas it has on it. Basically, it's talking to the rest of the U.S. military, where the big hump, I believe, is the main satellite antenna, but don't quote me on that. These are the laws that I see were broken by the Signal chat, and I quoted parts of it that I thought were most applicable. You can see things like if you have possession of secret stuff and then through gross negligence or any other thing, so even if they're like, we didn't know he was on there, so you were in charge, you should have known. If you're talking about putting secure stuff on a Signal chat and you didn't read the people that are on the chat before you put that on there, so aside from the fact that it's gross negligence that you're talking about it on Signal, you couldn't even be bothered to make sure the people that are receiving it were cleared to do it. I mean, it's so gross negligence. And when you're talking about gross negligence for somebody that's the Secretary of the Defense Department or the Director of National Intelligence or any of these other, it was a primary. These were cabinet level agency heads. They should have known better. And it should have been just because they were in that position, they should have been assumed that they knew better. Gross negligence. Violation of trust. So having knowledge, or you have been delivered to anyone, as soon as they found out, after Hegseth dropped his stupidity on this chat, the journalist started reaching out to every single other person on this chat and said, did you know I was on this chat? I've got the screenshots. Did you know I was there? Once that happened, they, aside from the gross negligence that they should have known who was on that chat, and they should have known exactly who was on that chat, the fact that he brought it to them and said, look, did you know? The fact that they did not report it. Under 18 U.S. Code number 793, having knowledge that anyone was delivered any information in violation of the trust, and you fail to make a prompt report of such loss, theft, abstraction, or destruction to anyone superior or any legal authority, you are guilty of a crime. So that's why I'm saying each and every single person on that Signal chat is in violation of U.S. law.
Wow. It undermines morale too. among rank and file, right?
That's the understatement of the century right there.
Yeah.
What happens right now is if I was still in uniform, my first thought is I wouldn't follow SecDef Hegseth. I wouldn't follow him into Walmart. I wouldn't trust him with my house plants. So it's just he completely lost his ability to lead. What happens the next time a pilot gets an order to go drop bombs on the Houthis? Or they're like, did the DUI hire Pete Hegseth? Did he blab this to somebody? Am I going to be met with a hail of bullets and an anti-aircraft missile before I even drop my bomb? So when you're talking about the destruction of morale, that's oh my God, that's an understatement. Yeah. Where you've got pilots not knowing if they can trust the people that are giving them their order.
And given the way this went down, Mike, what do you think the chances are that the Russians had access to this, have access,
100%.
Have all this?
100%. They were in Witkoff's phone, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
This is a very young airman, Jack, and I can never pronounce
Teixeira.
Yeah.
Teixeira, yeah.
He is serving 15 years in federal military prison for dropping sensitive information onto a commercial social media outlet.
Yeah.
That is the kind of, and his was relatively minor. He was just doing it to brag. Yeah. He wasn't doing it to leak anything. He was just like, hey, look what I can see at work. And he's serving 15 years.
Yeah.
One of the most junior-most people in the Air Force. You can see how young he looks. Good Lord. Does he even shave yet? And so when Hegseth is ducking and weaving and trying to dodge culpability, you got this kid serving 15 years for doing less than you did.
Yep. I remember when this information became public, the story broke, and he was arrested in a fairly public way because they chased him down, and I can't remember the exact location, but yet all the authorities coming in from all sides and arresting him. There were aerial shots that day. It was a huge international story. Yeah.
So last time I was on, we briefly mentioned some of the things like, one of my music performances was right next to the Concertgebouw and the London Symphony on that Performance Today program, and, Emmys, and I recorded 3 times with Amy Grant, all that kind of stuff. So one of the things I was trained at, when you're talking about my primary duty and then everything else the Air Force asked me to do, as a relatively senior NCO, one of the things that I was required to do when I was stationed in Texas was escort prisoners. And that requires special training on, of course, the legalities of what rights the prisoners have, what rights the prisoners does not have, because not only are they a prisoner, they are a military prisoner. So they have fewer rights than other prisoners do. But they still retain rights. So basically, the only place that I was forbidden, so let me rephrase that. I was required to be in physical contact with the prisoner everywhere that prisoner went, with the exception of any meeting with his lawyer. Everywhere else, doctor's office, they're sharing very private stuff. Everywhere else, I was required to be in physical contact with the prisoner. They were chained, of course, their wrists and their ankles, and then a chain running between them. When I saw this broke, I'm like, I'd frog march Hegseth in chains. I'm trained to do it. I could take him down. If he tries to escape, I have that training. Of course, he's chained foot, wrist, and ankle. Yeah. So Hegseth in chains is something that I have seen. Not him, but I've seen a side of military justice that most people haven't. And that's the side that Hegseth needs to face.
It's an incredible story. And to see Trump sitting there trying to deflect and distort, calling it a witch hunt, fake news, a hoax, even tonight with this NBC story coming out It blows my mind, and he should be ashamed of himself too for making excuses when it's his job to
Yeah.
hold somebody accountable on
He's the
this.
commander in chief, or as Truman had on his desk, the buck stops here. No matter what mistakes happen beneath me, I'm the president. I'm the guy in charge. It's my responsibility. And Trump isn't like that.
Yeah. And that's why I'm seeing personalities like what's her name? The blonde.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
No, an influencer.
Oh, if it's an influencer, I might not know.
Anyway, she's saying it'll come to me. But even Bill Maher, he said, I think 2 days ago or a day ago, people on the right are asking me to come and join them over on the right. And he said, no, I'm not joining you over there because I've acknowledged that there's Trump derangement syndrome on the left, but you also have to ask yourself, are you being honest when you're just making excuses? I'm paraphrasing for Trump. Like, are you really being honest with yourself when all of this is going on? So I'm kind of with Bill Maher, right? It's like, yeah, I'm going to criticize over here, but I'm also going to criticize over there because what Trump is doing right now is inexcusable.
It's a completely separate thing to be talking about policy differences, tax rates or even big things like the Department of Education and stuff like that. There's a policy debate to be had there. I'm on one side. I'm sure they're on the other. But when you're talking about the laws of classified information, the lives of pilots, the safety of hundreds of millions, if not billions, in military gear, taxpayer-funded military gear that you are responsible for, there's no excuse. There's no policy debate here.
Yeah. I want to run a little bit of this, well, maybe even just this thing from NBC and get you to comment on this because it's all related to what we're talking about.
I think they need more lights on their ceiling. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. That's incredible, isn't it?
I have a feeling most of them are either non-functional or they never use them.
No, I've been in studios
where they use that many lights.
That's a lot for different reasons, but it's like we don't want any shadows in here. Shadows are hereby banned. It's like, yeah, that's incredible. That's a lot of lights. Anyway, here, let's let this roll.
Good Sunday morning. President Trump is standing by his national security team as the fallout intensifies after top officials mistakenly shared attack plans for U.S. military strikes in Yemen on the Signal messaging app with a journalist. In an exclusive phone interview on Saturday, the president told me, quote, "I don't fire people because of fake news and because of witch hunts." Mr. Trump said he still has confidence in Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Just hours ago, President Trump called me to tell me he is, quote, pissed off with Russia's President Putin and threatened to impose secondary tariffs on Russia's oil. Quote, "If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia."
Ooh.
That's actually a bigger deal than it sounds, especially.
I know, but it's just, what do you make of that?
Well, which part? So there's the standing by people that I gave you the plain English of the law right there. They straight up broke the law and in a really awful fashion. They were going after Hillary for years, like 10 years, multiple congressional panels, just after her and after her and after her. And so I agree. This is a comparison thing. I agree that Hillary broke the law and she needed to be smacked a bit for it. And she did pay a price. It was one of the major reasons she was not elected in 2016. She set up a server that was dedicated to her email. That's all it ever did. while she was Secretary of State. The context here is the former Secretary of State, Colin Powell, General Powell, who was her predecessor under President Bush, said, look, the State Department's official email doesn't work very well. I had to use my private email all the time. Just be careful how you do it. Official Records Act apply and all that kind of stuff. And so she had the server set up during her campaign back in like 2008. And when she became Secretary of State and she couldn't get better system out of the State Department, she kept using her personal server. But here's the thing. I mentioned that President Trump has a skiff at Mar-a-Lago. He has a skiff at Trump Tower in New York, and he's got everything in the White House. He's got Air Force One. He's got all of these access to it. Hillary Clinton has a skiff in her house where that server lived. That server lived in a skiff. So was she guilty? Yes. It was a private server. It was mishandling of classified, at least sensitive information. Some of it was classified. I think her biggest problem was that she didn't firewall it off enough because she used the same email and the same server for personal information. That's a huge no. But then compare that to what Pete Hegseth just did. Personal phone in the middle of nowhere. The planes are launching now. So what Hillary did was wrong.
And he's really, 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 really angry with Putin now. He's really angry and pissed off too.
Well, on the
And
Ukraine
if it's his
side
fault,
of what
which
he
it
said,
might not be.
on the Ukraine side of what he said, I think I'm hoping, crossing all of my fingers and toes, that President Trump at some point realizes what I know, what the Ukrainians know, what all of Europe knows, is that Putin is not a trustworthy negotiator. That right now he's trying to achieve through Donald Trump what he couldn't achieve on the battlefield, what Ukraine prevented him from achieving on the battlefield. And that is the destruction of Ukraine as we know it. And his army can't do it. So he's trying to do it through Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is figuring out that that's what Putin's doing, that Putin is playing Trump, that he's just not trying to achieve peace, at least anything reasonable. Look, I've said it before. If Trump ends up doing the right thing over Ukraine, I will cheer Trump. I will sing his praises. I still don't think it's likely, but there it is. You have my promise.
More from NBC.
Mr. Trump said 25% tariffs on Russian oil could happen any moment and told me he plans to speak with President Putin this week. The president told me, quote, I was very angry, pissed off when Putin started getting into Zelensky's credibility and started talking about new leadership in Ukraine. On Iran, the president said he's also considering secondary tariffs.
So hold on the Russia. So it's funny that there has been more than one occasion where Russia knew exactly where Zelensky was. If they had the military capability to take out Zelensky, they could have done that over the past 3 years. America, with our precision weapons, we could have taken him out. So it's just, he's trying to achieve what he couldn't do. The thing about mandatory, dissolve the Ukrainian government. I don't know if you read that news report. That's Putin's latest ceasefire gambit. Yeah. But when he's talking about tariffs on Russian oil, I've said this before, before 22, Russia had three main cash crops that was most of their revenue that funded the entire nation. And two of them were high, and then there was a distant third. The two highest ones were military weapons, international sale of weapons, and the petroleum, oil, gas, coal, fossil fuels. A distant third is grain. I don't remember where they are, but like America and Canada are near the top. I think Ukraine might be higher than Russia, but I might be wrong on that. But it was still a serious cash crop for them. So grain isn't as much. They aren't selling any weapons. So the only thing that's funding the Russian government right now is oil. And so if Trump is going after Russia's oil, that is actually a big deal. So that if you're going to hit Russia where it hurts right now and you're not actually at war with them, going after their oil sale, that's where you go. Germany just confiscated one of the Ghost Fleet, one of Russia's oil tankers.
Right.
So
Iran doesn't agree to a nuclear deal. Quote, if they don't make a deal, there will be bombing. And it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before. After markets tumbled off.
crying out loud.
Yeah, keeps you there. You
So
talk.
didn't you talk because you can't? Didn't Trump run? And this is a rhetorical question because we all know the answer to this. That Trump ran on no more foreign wars, didn't he?
Right.
He wanted to. He got us out of Afghanistan in the worst way possible. He claims he defeated ISIS. He didn't defeat ISIS. ISIS is still around. Going after Iran, really? And then the really veiled threats on Greenland, on Denmark, where I don't think we're going to have to use military force. I don't think it'll come to that. And then we're talking about bombing the bejesus out of Iran now. I mean, we could do it. And like in 2003, Iraq, just like 2003 Saddam's Iraq, the modern nation of Iran is in violation of any number of international agreements and UN resolutions and all that kind of stuff. But like 2003 Iraq, why now? You know, Iraq wasn't doing anything. They weren't really a threat to anybody in 2003. So Iran is helping to fund and supply Russia and Ukraine. Iran is helping to fund and supply the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah against Israel. Like I said, they're in any number of state sponsor of terrorism, so violation of any number of international reasons to go in there hard. But why now? Why would you start it now?
He has destabilized things so much. Look at the headline on CTV News tonight. American invasion of Canada would spark decades-long insurgency, expert predicts. It's like I used to work for CTV, and this is how much he has destroyed.
Where this is
trust.
This is the conversation of otherwise sober people,
right? How did we get here? It's because of the guy in the middle, right there, in the blue suit.
The not Air Force blue suit.
Not the Air Force blue suit. No, no. Wow. I mean, they're literally talking here about what would happen if the U.S. invaded. How would Canadians respond? Talking about basically a resistance. People would rise up. That you would get, militant groups cutting communications, just all kinds of guerrilla warfare tactics, things like that. Because
there's
we
nothing
don't have a
good that
military.
would come
This is
from
crazy.
that.
What's that?
Yeah, there's nothing good that would come from that.
No.
Just like, and we're talking about completely different things, but when we went in and we dismantled the Iraqi government in 2003, we didn't replace it with anything because we didn't have the manpower. We didn't send in the manpower. We didn't allocate the manpower. So the dirty little secret of the Iraq invasion in 2003 is Al-Qaeda, which Al-Qaeda in Iraq is now ISIS. It's the same group. Al-Qaeda excommunicated them and they became ISIS. So ISIS used to be whatever you want to call it, Al-Qaeda. They were not in Iraq before 2003. Saddam was actually helping us after 9/11 with some intel sharing. He brutally put down any sort of, like, the first hint of an Al-Qaeda cell in Iraq while Saddam was in charge.
Mm-hmm.
They might not even be, their bodies might not even be all in one piece, like in a week. The brutality with which Saddam put down even the first hint of an Al-Qaeda intrusion into Iraq was just stunning. So once we dismantled the Iraqi government, we got Al-Qaeda. We got ISIS. That's where it started. So I don't even know where to begin with the Canada thing. Could we dismantle Canada's government? Yes. Could we occupy successfully Canada? Absolutely not. Oh my God, no.
And yet,
how would you even try?
But you know what? With the social media propaganda blitz that I'm seeing from certain people up here, they're going to take this story, and I'm pretty sure if there is commentary on this, they'll spin it around to say that this isn't Trump's fault. This is our government's fault in the mainstream media.
Oh, in Canada, you mean?
Yes, in Canada.
Oh,
they'll flip it around. There are some people who are distorting things. So I'm on the lookout for it.
Would they distort? So the level of trash that this Trump administration has thrown at Canada, and it wasn't even from Inauguration Day. When did it start? Like 6 weeks ago? Ish?
Well,
I don't think it
you
goes
want to
back
talk.
to January,
You really want the truth on when this whole overthrow the Canadian, like, take over Canada thing began? Years ago.
But did he mention it on the campaign trail with tariffs?
No, he never said it out loud.
Yeah. So
but, I've been connecting dots going back years.
Yeah, with the Paul Valley and all that kind of stuff. But just the level of silliness that's happened between Canada and the United States just in this year, the first quarter of this year, because we're not even 25% of the way through the year yet. Yeah. And Trump wasn't even president all of this calendar year yet.
Yeah. And so, I'm letting my emotions get the better of me here. We shouldn't get too far off into this subject matter. Let's get back to people flip-flopping, like, even Tulsi Gabbard, when it comes to what's happened here on the Signal chat and with regard to Yemen. There's just absolute hypocrisy at play. This is in 2018 and this is 2025.
She was in the peanut gallery before criticizing somebody else, and now she's the person that broke the law.
Yeah.
There are millions of Yemeni people who are on the brink of death from famine, disease, lack of access to food and water, basic medicine and healthcare. Thousands of Yemeni civilians have died in this genocidal war being waged by Saudi Arabia with support from the United States.
It's absolutely outrageous that the United States has continued its support for years now for Saudi Arabia's genocidal war in Yemen that has killed thousands and thousands of innocent Yemeni people and caused mass starvation and suffering, a cholera epidemic, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world in Yemen.
Congress finally passed legislation to end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's genocidal war in Yemen. Now this bill is sitting on President Trump's desk, awaiting his signature or veto. Now, he's already threatened to veto this bill, which just reveals how he cares more about what Saudi Arabia wants than what the American people want. You saw Trump's rhetoric on the campaign trail about Saudi Arabia, against United States support for Saudi Arabia, calling them out for what they are, and now refusing to end U.S. military support for this genocidal war in Yemen that Saudi Arabia is waging, that's created the worst humanitarian crisis of our generation, because he says, he doesn't want to risk a multi-billion-dollar arms deal with Saudi Arabia. So, you can see, at least in that respect, what he's really motivated by. He would rather continue to support the senseless and devastating deaths of innocent people in Yemen and using our U.S. military, my brothers and sisters in the military, to do that because he doesn't want to risk an arms deal with Saudi Arabia, a theocratic dictatorship that actually directly supports terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. Trump's leadership, going back through his first term as president, he has been and remains very committed to combating and defeating the threat of Islamist terrorism that not only affects the United States, the American people, our own safety and security, but it is affecting so many people in different parts of the world. We can see different terrorist groups, the Houthis in Yemen being one of them, that President Trump has redesignated after President Biden took them off of the terrorist list, redesignated them appropriately as a terrorist organization, and taking action where the previous administration failed to.
Right.
The Houthis have been disrupting maritime trade and passage for a very long time, and no serious effort has been taken to stop that disruption. Our country and other countries should not be in a position to have to make a decision to reroute commerce going through that area simply because of the Houthi threat that exists. So President Trump has taken decisive action for our own safety, security, and prosperity. And I know we'll look to other affected countries, as there are many who are impacted by this, to similarly take action.
That lady, well, she has no business being DNI. So some of the stuff that she said in the earlier videos that you showed were, it's hard to say that they're wrong, except that they took into account so little of the actual big picture that they end up being wrong. It's not that anything that she said was overly wrong. Some of it was grossly overstated to the point of where it was probably incorrect, but there were other factors involved. So like, what are you going to do with the Saudis if you decide to make an enemy of the Saudis? Where are they going to turn? So how important is it to keep our friendship with the Saudis? So now that it's her job to be DNI, that she already screwed up so badly, she's singing a quite different tune. It's the difference between being the critic and being the person that's actually in charge.
Yeah, she was going to end all the endless wars. He was going to stop bombing the Houthis. And 2 months in, not only is she bombing the Houthis, she is broadcasting it for all to see, far and wide, worldwide, and putting American troops at risk.
Well, and she's trying to paint half America as the enemy there too, where the weird thing about the strike that Hegseth blabbed on is that it wasn't really any different than anything that President Biden did. And Saudi Arabia has been going after him with some pretty impressive weaponry for a solid decade at this point. I don't see how we'd take the Houthis out without going in a lot harder than what they're talking about. I'm talking troops on the ground, door to door. Basically, you'd have to occupy Yemen. And even then, the Houthis would go somewhere else. It would be a bit of a whack-a-mole thing.
On Friday, and
More
with
NBC.
consumer confidence falling, the president also told me he's not backing down on his tariff plans.
What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
And the president telling me tariffs are, quote, absolutely permanent. And on fears of foreign automakers raising prices, quote, I couldn't care less if they raise prices because people are going to start buying American-made cars. And on his vow to annex Greenland, the president saying, quote, I never take military force off the table, but I think there's a good possibility that we could do it without military force.
Oh, well, I'm so relieved. Thank goodness.
It's like,
you
really?
might be
You
able
just-
to do it without military force. That's fantastic. I'm so
That's the
glad
part
that you
that
get to
blew
take
my
over
mind.
Greenland that way.
Because we don't already have troops there and we couldn't already like, hey, can we set up another base there as part of our, Arctic defense in NATO? And they probably would have said yes. I mean, I don't get it. The Greenland thing, I just don't get. Unless he just wants to be tough and people around him aren't saying no, and he doesn't quite get that he could have gotten everything he wanted just by being nice.
I said that about Canada with our friend John in Alberta. We talk here almost like every day. And I said, John, if Trump had just said, hey, if you guys would like to join us down here and become part of the United States, it's always an option, but it's up to you guys. It's entirely up to you. If you'd like to, the invitation is open. And I probably would have said, well, that sounds pretty enticing. Maybe we should look at that. I kind of wanted to move to Texas or someplace warm a long time ago when I was younger, and I love the United. I'd entertain that. But when you come up here and you start saying we're taking you over, whether you like it or not, boy, I'm like, whoa.
You start laying down some smack. You start making people mad, getting their elbows up.
That's right.
But the Greenland thing, I mean, we already have a base there.
I know.
A friend of mine was stationed
you've got
there
bases here. You have NORAD. We already work with you. You've got your Canadian flags up in your skiffs. It's like, what more do you want?
And the idea that there is even such a thing as an American-made car or a Japanese-made car or a German-made car anymore is just not true.
That's right.
I like something like a Ford or a Chevy. They're going to be, 40 to 50%.
Yeah.
Even if they're assembled in the States. Cause I drive a Honda and a Toyota. Both of them were assembled in the United States.
Yeah.
But they have the Toyota, they've got the Japanese makes on them, but the American workers put them together and some of their parts were made in America here. Mm-hmm. Some of their engineers were probably American because like the Honda I have is a minivan. That design is unique to the United States. The version that they sell in Japan is different. The version they sell in Australia is different. The one that I have is the United States version. So even their engineers, it's an American car, as much as that is. But I think Canada makes engines, I'd like to say, for one of the big American car companies.
They make engines, I think, still in Windsor.
Yeah, I don't know all the way back to the F-35 discussion. Canada made, I'm not pulling the number off the top of my head. They made a significant fraction of all of the F-35s. There are more than 1,000 F-35s currently flying in different militaries around the world. Canada made the tail section, the tail control planes, and some other parts of the rear section of, I'd like to say, between 25 and 50% of all F-35s that are currently flying. So it's an American jet, but it's like they're flying around with Canadian parts on them, So it's the idea that there is such a thing as an American car or a Japanese car or a German car is just stupid.
Yeah, it's true. And I just looked it up to make sure. And yes, Ford still manufactures the 5-liter V8 in Windsor.
Oh, and so that's one of their major engines. It's one of their flagship engines.
Yeah, great motor, I gotta say. They make a few different engines there. And here's the other thing. I don't know if you were aware of this. I reported this the other night. The day that Trump signed that executive order saying that the tariffs on autos would go into effect on April 3rd, later that day, they released a fact sheet on the tariffs. If you go look at that, it actually exempts
a lot,
all of it, basically, that is USMCA compliant already. So, but he didn't talk about that. So on April 3rd, if he follows through and the fact sheet is correct, these tariffs aren't even really going to happen. So it's almost like there's something weird going on.
Smoke and mirror. He's the Wizard of Oz.
Yes. So this isn't even going to happen, even though, at least not on the auto tariffs. And I think that's because somebody has taken him and has slapped him across the face and said, wake up. You can't do this. You'll destroy the auto industry. You had the executives from Ford and General Motors go and see him last month.
Yeah.
To tell
Yes,
him
they
that.
should.
You had the
He
Economist.
doesn't have anyone working for him. He might as well have CEOs of major companies come and give him the business.
And a former advisor to him, the Economist, Mr. Laffer, published a report that was then given to Trump within the last week, just before he signed that executive order and released that fact sheet, telling him, Donald, you can't do this. It will destroy the auto industry because everything is integrated. Yeah. It would take years to actually bring all of this production into the U.S. You can't do this.
Well,
I think he knows.
We talked a little bit about this on the jet airplanes because we were talking about what alternatives are for Canada to the F-35, where one of my examples was there was a big fighter production line in Texas near Dallas, Fort Worth, that for the longest time, for decades, was churning out the F-16s. It dates back to World War II. It's a historic factory, but it was converted entirely to F-35 manufacturing. And since we still had buyers and operators of F-16s, it was decided to build and open a brand new F-16 plant in South Carolina. And so they started it in 2018, and the first jets were finally delivered last year from that plant. So when you're talking about now COVID was in there too, and supply disruption stuff. So 2018 to 2024, it should have been shorter than that. In a perfect world, it would have been more like 3 to 4 years, but 3 to 4 years is a big deal when you're talking about trying to entirely domesticate car production, where you've got to, because it's all up and down the chain. It's from where do you get the ore from, who is refining the ore, who is machining the parts, it's just everything up, and forget just the assembly plant, who's doing every other part of this, and that it doesn't exist in the United States. So yeah, car production would, if they were actually true tariffs, then car production would come to a screeching halt.
So something
once
really
they
weird
ran
going
out
on.
of their stockpile of parts, there would be no more cars.
Something weird going on, because the Economist, Arthur Laffer, I studied him a little bit when I was a student back in university.
Is he the guy from the Laffer curve, or am I?
Yes, that's exactly the guy who came up with the concept of price elasticity of demand. Yeah, that's what the Laffer curve.
The Laffer curve that I'm thinking of, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you have more education. I'm self-educated, which is really dangerous. The self-educated people can know a lot, but one of the real dangers is if you don't have somebody guiding you, like a professional teaching you, you can have these gaping holes you don't even know you have. So my understanding,
tax rates and tax revenue.
Yeah. So like 0% and 100%,
yep.
The tax revenue will be zero. And between them, there is some version of a curve, and it's not going to be an even curve. And so there's going to be a sweet spot where you maximize revenue, but you also maximize economic growth, and there's going to be a sweet spot. And so when that came out, I don't remember when he came out with the curve, but it was a Reagan thing where he's like, the taxes are too high. And when you're talking about stagflation in the 70s, he was probably right. We are still dealing with a lot of World War II taxes. And they needed to come down because we were at the wrong part of the curve.
Yeah. And actually,
so is that correct? Is my understanding correct?
Yes, that's right. Okay. Because at a certain point, if you increase taxes too much, you'll actually end up recouping,
lowering revenue.
less revenue, which is what Reagan also
but the opposite's true, and this is what we're dealing with now, because the Reagan economics it became religious dogma. So now we're at the other part of the Laffer curve where tax rates are too low, and so revenues hurt, but so is economic growth because revenue got hurt. And we're paying for that in crappy roads and bridges that are falling apart and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the price elasticity of demand, I am incorrect in saying that, because it was actually a different economist who came up with that concept.
Gotcha. Okay.
But you're quite right. The Laffer curve is about the relationship between revenue acquisition and and tax rates. But at least, you know, somebody is trying to talk some sense to Trump, which is the point. And I certainly hope that he is listening, and he seems to be. Maybe that's why he needs to save face and say, I'm still being tough and I'm proceeding with these tariffs. But over here in the back end, if you read the fine print, it's really nothing.
And that's the only reason for hope on dealing with Trump, is that his pride and his narcissism and his ego, if he doesn't get what he wants, or if what he tries blows up in his face, he's gonna be bothered by that. It's gonna like affect him personally. So if somebody can talk sense into him in a way that feeds his ego and narcissism, and his pathological need for praise, you know, Donald Trump, you're the greatest, you know, kind of crap. But
and there was a
people
change
that
of tone.
figured that out.
There was a change of tone the other day when he had that first phone call with Mark Carney. I don't know if you're aware, being down in the US.
I was reading about that while you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this gives me new hope, because he didn't call him governor, and they said that it was productive, and they agree on many things. And then
the leader of Finland played a round of golf. Was that today or yesterday with Trump? It's the same sort of idea, because Finland bordering Russia, they have a huge stake in the Ukraine thing. And so the leader of Finland trying to talk sense into Trump.
Yeah. And so I found hope in that. And I said, that's great, because now Trump is saying that when he's referring to countries, and I'm paraphrasing, ripping off the U.S. or taking advantage of the U.S., he's not really talking about Canada. That's what he said that day. And that's a 180. I'll take it. I'll take the win.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a conservative or a liberal prime minister talking to him, whoever it is. If we just can get things back on an even keel, thumbs up.
Yeah.
And yet I see people here spinning it around saying, I don't like it. There's something wrong. And it's a big, you know, I don't know, a conspiracy. And they're upset because Trump is saying positive things about Carney. And now it's like some shadowy, dark conspiracy thing that Carney's really working with Trump to turn over Canada to the United States, in which case I'm like, well, why are you upset? That's what you want anyway. It's just, you guys are never happy. 1 minute you want to join the US and just give everything up, just capitulate. And
who was the first guy that you played that video from that was talking about Canada has healthcare that is frankly better than the United States?
That's Jagmeet Singh, New Democratic Party. So they're sort of third, fourth party in the country. They have traditionally been sort of labor oriented, left-wing socialist. He's
so a little bit from my past. I was 28 years old when I went to basic training. So I had already been an adult for 10 years. I had been married for 2 years before I went to basic training. That's where I was at. I grew up poor, so my parents didn't really have health insurance either. When I went to basic training, I hadn't seen a dentist in more than 10 years. And my health insurance was spotty at best. And so it was when I got into the military, and all of a sudden I had military healthcare. And in America, they're like, oh, government run healthcare. Military healthcare was amazing. So I could go see a doctor for free. They give me sometimes I had to do my homework and say, look, really, there's something wrong with me. And this is probably what it is. Maybe you should look a little bit harder. But I mean, that's just being an adult and not taking no for an answer. But yeah. So I had to listen to that guy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with government run healthcare. I really am. I lived for 22 years very happily with government run healthcare.
Well, Canadians value that stuff up here. They really do. I personally would like to see sort of more of a hybrid system.
You could always do better.
Yes,
there's no perfect system.
And in fact, as critical as I've been of the healthcare system, I said 3 months ago when I went to emergency that I had the best experience at the emergency department of my life, because the government of Ontario has made such amazing improvements over the past year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like being in a 5-star hotel.
Yeah.
And I got an MRI within hours.
Wow.
How hard is that? Like,
Well,
that's in Canada, that people are usually on waiting lists. Nope, I got right in. It was amazing.
Well, here's an example of America. My oldest son, when he was born, we were in the hospital it was 48 hours of really rough labor. It turned into an emergency C-section, so emergency surgery. I paid exactly $0 for that because both my wife and I were active duty military. When one of my brothers had a somewhat similar, they ended up paying $50,000. That was their hospital bill for the birth of their child. So the difference between a big fat goose egg, I just take my baby home, versus you take your baby home, your wife's still in pain, and you owe $50,000 to the hospital. So yeah, it could be worse. I'm just going to tell you that.
Yes. That's what I keep saying about all these people out in Alberta right now who are like, yeah, we want to be independent. We want to join the United States. And I'm like, okay, but you better find out what that really means, because when I've run comparisons between standard of living, income, the quality of life between Texas and Alberta, because two oil-rich locations. And at the end of the day, it's sort of kind of almost the same at the end, but there's a good possibility, like a much higher possibility, that you could fall through the cracks and end up on Skid Row because of things like healthcare, because of you have more money that you keep, but then you have much higher expenses for things like education, healthcare.
And don't get me wrong, right? There's a lot of things about the States that I love, but there's a lot of things that I know that we need to do better on.
Sure. And same thing in Canada. So, if you just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater to get a tax break, which is really kind of what it's coming down to out there when I listen to the arguments, you might want to think twice. Just saying. Right. And the independence thing, we'll just be independent. It's not going to work out. You can't. What does being independent solve? Are you going to get your pipelines built east-west if you're independent? You have the same problems. No, you're still stuck with one customer for your oil, south, unless you can still make deals with the other provinces to get your pipelines built that way. So you're still dealing with going south. And then if you're independent, how are you going to defend your country? You'll need a military. So now you're going to have to spend money on that.
Yeah.
You're alone. You see, it's not so simple. There are these questions that are not even being raised. They're just telling people, imagine you won't have to pay transfer payments to the federal government. We'll keep all that money. Yeah, well, maybe not quite that simple. Just, be careful what you ask for. You might just get it. Anyway,
sometimes,
Mike,
yes.
Yeah. Was there anything else on this thing from NBC that we need to address here? Let me just check here. I don't want to leave any stone unturned tonight. Yeah, there's still a little bit more. Let's finish this up and then we'll wrap up.
The White House is still on defense this weekend after the Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg says he was added to that Signal conversation by Mr. Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, where details of the plans for an attack on the Houthis in Yemen were shared with him in real time. The chat included the vice president, the defense secretary, the secretary of state, the CIA director, and the director of national intelligence. The explanations for what happened and how serious of a security breach it was have been evolving.
I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious, how's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then then somehow it gets sucked in, it gets sucked in.
Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Intelligence officials defended the sensitive nature of the content, denying it was classified.
My communications, to be clear, in a Signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
There was no classified material that was shared.
Was there any mention of a target in Yemen?
I don't remember mention of specific targets.
Was there any mention, Ms. Gabbard, of a weapon or weapons system?
I don't recall specific weapons systems being named.
How about anything about timing?
I don't recall specific timing.
Any mention of any military unit whatsoever? Mr. Ratcliffe?
Not that I recall.
Ms. Gabbard?
Not that I recall.
After the administration insisted there was no classified information on the text chain, Goldberg released the messages that included Defense Secretary Hegseth sharing specific details about when bombs would drop and when U.S. jets would take off just 30 minutes before they launched the attack. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz texted that a key target of the attack had been seen walking into his girlfriend's building that had collapsed. President Trump is privately angry with Waltz, two Republican sources tell NBC News. The Senate Armed Services Committee has requested a formal investigation from the Pentagon's Inspector General, but the FBI and the DOJ seem unlikely to investigate the matter, even as pressure mounts for more accountability.
There was a crime here, and there should be accountability.
This White House lies. It's hypocritical. It's corrupt. So no, I don't trust the Fox to investigate the hen house.
I'm also puzzled by some of the answers that were given by the DNI at the intelligence hearing.
I think everybody has acknowledged, including the White House, that, mistakes were made. And what we want to do is make sure that something like that doesn't happen again.
And voter anger is growing over the issue, on display at this town hall in Indiana.
Will you demand the immediate resignation of Pete Hegseth? No, I will not demand their resignation.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you know, a lot of Americans are really mad about this, and it's not just me.
Yeah. John's calling in from Alberta. Let me just find out what he wants briefly, and then I'm going to get your final thought as we wrap up for the night. Go ahead, John, very quickly. What's up, sir?
Well, my friend, just Canadians, my friend from the United States, and I'm part American. Just two questions, but one is, how do these ex-presidents leave the White House with all these top secret documents? Like, is there not a guard or a gatekeeper for the United States of America that makes sure Bill Clinton or Hillary or Obama or they don't leave with all these? Like, I'm just.
Well, we kind of addressed that earlier, but I'll get a very brief comment from Mike on that. What's the other question, quickly, John? Because we're right at the end.
My friend in the U.S., we'd like to know, where does the Vice President does the guy wear black eyeliner? Like, it's kind of funny, spooky.
I don't know that Mike's in a position to comment on that, but
is it the local drag queen.
We don't want to go down that road tonight, John. But with that, we got to wrap up because we're right on at the end here.
Just how did all these secret documents leave the White House that are not
okay?
declassified?
I'm sure Mike will comment on it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I'll talk to you a little later. Okay.
Show the friend our orange orangutan song. Bye.
So one of the things that we could compare, and there's a reason why Joe Biden did not face any real blowback for what they found, was as soon as the things started going down at Mar-a-Lago, he's like, okay, we need to scrub everything that I've got. Versus, and then he's like, look, he notified the National Archives, who owns the documents after the president leaves office. And he's like, look, I've got these. How do you want me to give them back to you? So that was how that went down. Versus Mar-a-Lago, where he specifically, like I said, we have the video of him taking them out of the White House. The National Archives are like, hey, we're missing some things. Hey, Trump, can you look for these and see if you can get them back? And so in addition to the keeping of the documents, then he started obstructing justice, where he's like, no, I don't have them. Or no, those are mine. So he just kept not even cooperating with that. And so when they raided Mar-a-Lago looking for the documents, it was after something like 18 months of back and forth between Trump's lawyers and the National Archives trying to get it back. So there's a fundamental change, a difference in character between those. But we did cover that a little bit, where when you've got somebody that is as high as the president or the vice president or a cabinet secretary, like a secretary of state or a secretary of defense, their jobs don't stop just because they're not at the office. So when they're at home, they are still the president, they are still the secretary of state, they're still secretary of defense, and they can be called at any hour of any day of the year. And so somebody like Clinton, Bush had one in his ranch in Texas. Like I said, Trump had classified areas both in Trump Tower in New York and in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Sometimes things there's a lot that goes through them. And so when things are missed, sometimes you have to, after the fact, clean it up. And so it's not so much that they kept them, it's just that they're still in the process of cleaning it up.
And so I think we kind of addressed this earlier in the program. So let's just get your final thoughts on what we just saw here at the tail end of this NBC report tonight, which is in itself, this report is making news because it's just so over the top. It's
well, and I watched Mark Kelly go after DNI Gabbard in real time, and I'm just like, get him, Mark. So Mark Kelly, for those that don't know, he is a combat pilot. He is a naval pilot. He flew 30-something combat missions during the first Gulf War in 91. After that, he became an astronaut, and he was on 4 space missions, and he commanded 2 of them. And now he's a U.S. Senator from the state of Arizona. He knows his business. He knows this topic very well, better than me, and that's not even a contest. He knows the business. He's got it. The ironic part of that whole Senate hearing is, I don't know how much you watched it or if you remember when they're like, yeah, we're going to take that during the offline session. When I mentioned that all sorts of places have SCIFs, there are SCIFs in the House and the Senate where they take these committees and the witnesses to a secure location where they can discuss things that are not for the C-SPAN cameras. And so just putting that out there. But the gross incompetence from Gabbard, where she was not even aware of what was in this text chain, and the story had broken the previous day, at least 24 hours earlier, and she's in front of a Senate committee and she's trying to say that she doesn't know what was on there. Are you kidding me? So when you're talking about gross incompetence and failure to do your job, I would not have accepted that from a subordinate when I was in the Air Force. That was just that sort of response. They would have been in more trouble. Like the fact that they were trying to BS me like that. No, if they had come clean and they had been honest and they're like, look, this was a problem. Or that thing where I said that the journalist had contacted every single person on that Signal chat and said, look, this is what's going on. They had an obligation, a legal obligation to report it. They didn't. So aside from the 24 hours before, the journalist had contacted Gabbard, at least her office, but from my understanding, he was on Signal saying, look, I was on this chain. She knew, and this was how many days that she had this, the level of BS going on right here, the level of incompetence, the level of trying to skate from just gross negligence is just astonishing. So I've said it before, I should say it again. We're living in times that are historic in nature, for good or ill. We all need to rise to the moment. What we do matters, what I do matters, what Rick does matters, what the listeners do matters. And we need to we need to rise to the moment. We need to make sure that this is not where everything falls apart.
Yeah. And so ends this chapter in the Signalgate saga, but the story is not over. Of that I am sure.
Not even close.
Yeah. On this March 30th of 2025, and a new week begins tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah. So
we'll see what fresh BS they give us tomorrow.
Hope for a better week as we look at tariffs.
Get your pitchforks and shovels ready. You might have to shovel more just first thing tomorrow.
Yeah. And with that being said, I'll try to bring as much truth as I can tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. And until then, I'll leave you with the Orange Orangutan as requested by our friend John out in Alberta. And until then, I will catch you all on the flip side.
Monkey see, monkey do. Vladimir Putin's making a fool out of you. Once a deal maker, now just a shouter. Used to shake hands, now it's all about power. You turn your back on your friends and your allies too. You betrayed the spirit of the red, white, and blue. Oh, orange orangutan man, swinging through the world with a heavy hand. Tearing up treaties, slapping on tariffs, throwing tantrums like a billionaire sheriff. Dial it down, don't stop it, man, you beast, you critter. Orange orangutan man. Donald Trump 1.0 had a plan. Now Donald J. Trump 2.0's a wrecking man. Used to make deals, now you just sneer. Ruling through fear, grinning ear to ear. Canada's not for sale, Greenland ain't yours. Gaza's not a playground, quit making wars. Bluffing and puffing with the wig on tight. Acting like a boss, but you lost the fight. The art of the deal, man, that ship sunk. Now it's all about rage and a nuclear funk. Orange orangutan man, swinging through the world with a heavy hand. Tearing up treaties, slapping on tariffs, throwing tantrums like a billionaire sheriff. Dial it down, don't stop it, man, you beast, you critter. Orange orangutan man. You're fired. No, you're just bananas.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.